Welcome back to App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Jam, Notion, and Tailscale. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing well. You know, we had a good conversation about game emulation and streaming services in the pre-show. So if people are interested in learning more about that kind of thing, they should go to plus.club and join as a Club Premier member, because then they'll get App Stories Plus. Or if you'd prefer just to subscribe to App Stories Plus, you can go to appstories.plus. It's super simple. A lot of perks with the club, but you can also just get App Stories Plus by itself as well. Today, Federico, we are going to do a classic pick two and talk a little bit about some of the apps we've been trying lately. And I see you've got a couple of interesting ones here. I have a couple of too. It looks like you and I have been playing around on the Mac a lot lately.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Fancy that, you with your Mac pad and me with my Mac. But I want to kick it off. I want to kick it off with a utility today.
All right. Which one?
It's called rCMD, RCMD. And this is a utility that's been around for a while. I stumbled across it again from Rob Knight, who I do the Ruminate podcast with on Mac Stories. He had linked to it. And it's a pretty simple app that lets you use the right command key to switch apps. So the reason this appealed to me is that I'm a diehard command tabber. And so I often will just hit Command Tab and just cycle through my apps and move around that way. But actually, I do that so much that I was actually getting a little bit of wrist pain from it, which was no good. So I was looking for ways to quickly switch. And the other thing that caught my eye when I went to the rCMD website was they mentioned that it's a nice way to switch between stages in Stage Manager. And I actually use Stage Manager quite a bit. And it's really not doing it in a kind of a direct Stage Manager way, because Apple's not really providing any APIs for third parties to do that. But because you can hit the command key and a letter, you can look over at your Stage Manager, look at the groupings that you have there on various stages, and hit command and the letter for one of these apps, and it automatically switches to that stage without you having to click on the stage with the mouse. And I'm very much more a keyboard-driven Mac user than I am a mouse user, although I use a mouse also to kind of even out the wear and tear on my wrists on my hands. But the way this app works is very simple. It by default will assign the apps that are open to the right-hand command plus the first letter of the name of the app. So I do Command F, I go to Finder. I do Command M, I go to Messages. I go to Command O, I get Obsidian, that sort of thing. Very easy. If you have multiple apps with the same first letter in their name, it cycles through them. And I've found that it's rare that I have more than 2 or 3 at once. Most of them are unique, but often it'll be like Mail and Messages, for instance, that kind of thing. There'll be a couple. And so that's not too bad either. And you can also give them unique ones. So if you had Mail and Messages, maybe you make Mail Command A, because that's the second letter in Mail instead of the M. But I haven't found it to be too hard to cycle through them. So I've been using it now for about a week and a half, and I like it because a lot of times I'm sitting there, I've got the Stage Manager is visible, and I need to switch over to something quickly. I just hit, Command N, and I'm in Numbers looking up some information, and then I flip back over to use Command O to flip back over to Obsidian, that sort of thing. It's been really kind of a handy way to move between apps.
Interesting. So I tried using this a couple of years ago, and I couldn't stick with it, but maybe I should check it out again.
It takes a little while to get used to it. I mean, and I'm not using it constantly. I'm still using Command Tab. I haven't abandoned Command Tab at all. But if I happen to be working in 2 or 3 apps for a particular project, it's easier for me to remember to do it, because that way I kind of know I'm doing Obsidian and Numbers, for instance, and it's just flipping back and forth. So I don't know. It's a different way of doing it, but I've found it pretty nice so far.
Very nice.
This episode of AppStories is brought to you by Jam. If you're a web developer and you work on a team, you'll know that sometimes your teammates send you bug reports that aren't very good because they have very little context. Like maybe there's no text description, or it's just a text description, and there's no screenshot, console logs, or user ID. And instead of fixing it, you have to go to the person who made the ticket and hunt down the right information. Or you go back and forth over weeks in the ticket comments trying to figure out whether it was a local storage API, the response to a network request, cookies at the time zone you're in, or whatever it happens to be. And it ends up being really frustrating trying to figure out what went wrong. You might have heard of Jam because it's used by more than 90,000 people. That's because it's a free tool that saves web developers and designers a ton of time and frustration. It ensures that your teammates make perfect bug reports every time. They literally can't do it wrong because it automatically includes video of the bug, console logs, network requests, and the information you need to debug, like even what the internet speed was. Plus, it automatically lists the steps to reproduce the bug. It's so easy to get your teammates to use, too, because it's just a Chrome extension. When they see a bug, they click on a button, and right away it creates a ticket in your issue tracker. So it saves time for them, and it saves you a lot of hopping on calls and meetings to debug. If you're a web developer and you would rather spend your time writing code than responding to comments in your issue tracker, send your team to jam.dev. That's jam.dev, or just click the link in the show notes. Our thanks to Jam for their support of the show.
Okay, so my first pick is an app that I tried many times over the years. It's called Keep It.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Keep It is it's sort of like it's an everything sort of database kind of app. So let me explain why I'm using this. So for the past couple of weeks, I've been collecting. This is a very sort of like inside baseball kind of thing. So I've been collecting all the PDFs that Apple PR has sent me over the years. One of the things that Apple PR does, I mean, this is not a secret I'm revealing or anything. When you're reviewing an Apple product, whether it's an operating system or a device, they send you a PDF guide with a bunch of details. And those are mostly like details that are like it's the equivalent of what you can find on the Apple website, but with a little more
Right.
detail, with nicely formatted pages and tables, like all kinds of specs. And it's also a nice way to sort of it's like a moment in time in Apple PR and marketing. And so I have this collection of guides for multiple versions of iOS, iPadOS, multiple iPads, iPhone models, Mac models. And I thought a few weeks ago, I kind of want to collect all of these PDFs that are scattered in my Gmail account, for the past decade or so. And so I went into Spark. I created like a collection of saved searches because they're coming from different PR contacts at Apple, right? So I had to filter, like I had to use the Gmail syntax to filter by the apple.com domain, and then I search whether the messages had attachments, and if the attachment was a PDF, and if the PDF was called guide or something. So I collected these 30 plus PDF documents. And it's fascinating because I have like some documents, I have multiple flavors. Like I have the June version and the September version of the same product, which is fascinating. That usually happens with operating system. There are some changes, between the beta release in June and the September release. And it's fascinating to keep them, if only from a from a private historical perspective. And so I was looking for a way to organize all these PDFs and to make them searchable. And initially, I started using DevonThink. And I know that DevonThink has a lot of power and a lot of options for, folks who really want to organize thousands of documents, and especially like academics who need to put together these complex search queries with the database format that DevonThink uses. However, DevonThink was too much of a power user tool for me. Like, I just wanted an easy way to collect a bunch of PDFs and to organize them in folders and to search them. And in DevonThink, I found myself like creating the database and managing the database and think like I wanted something easier because once again, I understand why so many people need the power of something like DevonThink. I am not advanced enough for that one thing. And so I remembered Keep It. And my experience with Keep It, I used it in the past and I was always kind of turned off by some of the UI glitches and some of the bugs that I encountered. And I gotta tell you, John, that over the past couple of years, Keep It has gotten really, really good, like much better at dealing with importing multiple documents at once. And one of the things that I really like is that Keep It on macOS now has a native Finder extension, so that whatever you add to Keep It shows up in the Finder sidebar under
Oh,
a
nice.
location section, kind of like Dropbox does. I have a Keep It icon in my
Right,
Finder, and if I click it, I just see the file structure, the same one that I see in the app. It's also reflected
right.
in Finder, which is great for data portability and just accessing my documents. They're not locked into the app at all. Um, Once I started using it, I realized that all those PDFs had not been previously OCR'd. And so I used something that I wrote about in Club Mac Stories a couple of years ago. It's a utility for Mac called OCR Kit Pro, where you basically point
Oh,
the
wow.
app
Yeah.
at a folder containing PDF documents, and it just applies text recognition to all of them and saves a copy of each document with OCR, with like recognized text embedded within the document. So I applied OCR to all of my PDFs, redragged them again into Keep It, removed the previous one that did not have OCR applied. And now when I'm in Keep It, I can just search for, say, a specific feature of an iPhone or a specific
Mhm.
functionality of a version of iOS, and Keep It will find it for me. So it's a great way for me to have a private database of Apple marketing material and details for things like tech specs. That is great to use. And Keep It does a good job. Like, it lets you read those PDFs in line, you can edit them, you can highlight things, and you can create folders and subfolders. And of course, everything syncs with iCloud to other devices. So I have the same database, which is just a folder of PDF files, but I have the same database in a traditional file structure on my iPhone and the iPad as well. So if you haven't played around with Keep It in a while, I think it's gotten much better than it used to be, and that's I put it on my home screen because now I want to save all kinds of things and make them indexable using Keep It.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Notion. There is so much to love about Notion. I've been using Notion for a long time now. It's been years, actually. And the thing that drew me to it is its ability to organize large amounts of information in a way that makes it incredibly easy to find. And now with Notion AI, it's even easier to do all those things because you can use Notion to summarize meeting notes, to organize notes you've taken from a bunch of research materials, whatever it happens to be. It helps you keep that information right at your fingertips and perfectly organized. Notion is a place where your team can write, plan, and organize and rediscover the joy of play. It's a workspace designed not just for making progress, but for getting inspired. It's an AI powered workspace where things just take care of themselves. Meetings have summaries, documents find themselves, and every question has an answer. Notion AI turns knowledge into action. From summarizing meeting notes and automatically generating action items to getting answers to the questions that you need in seconds. If you can think of it, you can make it. And it's for everyone, whether you're a Fortune 500 company or a freelance designer starting a new startup or a student juggling classes and clubs. Try Notion for free by going to notion.com/appstories. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/appstories to start turning ideas into action. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. That's notion.com/appstories. Our thanks to Notion for their support of the show. All right, Federico, you know that I have got a bit of an obsession when it comes to
Mm.
using large language models to translate audio into speech and the other way around, speech to audio. And one of the things that I've been doing, speaking of creating databases of information, is I've been creating my own personal database of all the episodes of our podcast. So it's very
Mm.
easy for me to go through, search those text files, and find old episodes and link to them. Now, I don't do that all the time. I don't do it very often, but it's handy to have. And I've found that OpenAI's Whisper is quite good. It is not good enough to publish those transcripts, but it is good enough to create my own database and allow me to do full text searching. So what I do is about once a month, I go through and I transcribe everything that we've done in the past on AppStories, for instance, over the past month. And sometimes, if I'm busy, I kick it down the road a little bit. And I had gotten a little bit behind, hadn't really dealt with this stuff in a while, and decided I would revisit Mac Whisper to see what's been going on over there, because that is an app made by Jordy Brune and has been around since the very earliest days of Whisper being released publicly as an API. And it's really come a long way. I was very impressed with it. It was a very simple app when it was first released, but now it has all sorts of different options you can use to convert audio into text. You can feed the thing files, which is what I was doing with our episodes of App Stories, or you can feed it the audio from your Mac. So, for instance, I believe I could be feeding the audio from Audio Hijack right into Mac Whisper as you and I speak and do the transcription on the fly. I'm not doing that. I do worry a little bit about getting too many things working with audio at once while I'm recording and causing problems for myself, but that is an option too. And you might want to do that if you're listening to, say, a YouTube video and want to transcribe it live using Mac Whisper. You also can use your mic and speak right into Mac Whisper and use it as a sort of dictation tool, which is a good option. And you can do batch transcriptions, which is what I did because I was behind. So I just took all of the MP3s from several episodes of App Stories, dragged them into Mac Whisper, and hit go, and came back like, I know it took a few hours to do, but it was nice to be able to do that one after the other and come back and have nothing but a folder full of text files that I could then put in my archive. So that has been really neat. The other things that it's got now are an option to access the app globally that allows you to very quickly get audio into Mac Whisper and get translations. I'm not sure where I would use this, but you can summon it very quickly, speak into your microphone or grab some other audio, transcribe it into text. Plus, there are translation options, so you can change the text into another language, and a beta podcast transcription feature that lets you take two audio tracks, feed those in after identifying the name of the person whose track it is, and it'll interweave the transcription into a single transcript. And I tried a little bit of that with your voice and mine. The files I hadn't been started at exactly the same time, so that caused some problems. But I'm going to give it a try, because one thing you can do with Logic is you can create an audio file out of just one track in Logic and export it that way. So once it's edited, I could export a track for you, a track for me, and then interweave them and have our names in there. So it'd be a little easier to figure out who's saying what. I haven't done that yet, but we'll see. I may do that in the future. And then it has a lot of different models available for doing the transcriptions in terms of the LLMs. And I've been using the biggest one, which tends to be the most accurate, but it's a few gigabytes in size. So if you want to do it, if you're on a laptop with constrained space, you can use one of the smaller models. That's nice to have that option. And then I'm also was impressed with the export options, because there are a lot of different formats that you can export in, including things like, for the closed captioning for things like YouTube videos. So a lot that can be done there. And the last thing I will mention is that it has ChatGPT integration now too. So you could take that transcript that you create from an audio file and you could feed it into a prompt for ChatGPT. You have to use your own token for the API, but then you could create a summary. So, for instance, if you want to create a description of the podcast or something like that, you could do that. Kind of an interesting option. Haven't tried that one yet. I am going to try it just to see how it does, but I don't think it's going to replace how I write the descriptions for the show. But it could be something where if you have a lot of audio and are just looking for like the highlights, it could be a nice way to do that. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Tailscale. Tailscale is programmable networking software that is private and secure by default. And it's the easiest way to connect your devices and services to each other, wherever they happen to be. Tailscale is super secure, providing remote access to production, databases, servers, Kubernetes, and a whole lot more. And it's fast, like really, really fast. Plus, it grants privacy for everyone and every organization. It's an intuitive, programmable way to manage your private network, including a zero trust network access that every organization can use. With Tailscale, you can build a simple network across complex infrastructure, replace legacy VPN infrastructure in just a few minutes, and you can save time with a trusted and proven networking solution that just works. Try Tailscale out for free for up to 100 devices and 3 users for free by going to tailscale.com/appstories. There's no credit card required. That's tailscale.com/appstories to try Tailscale for free for up to 100 devices and 3 users with no credit card. Our thanks to Tailscale for their support of the show.
Okay, so my second pick is Fork. Now, Fork, it is a GitHub client, or at least
Right.
that's the way that I've been using it. It's a Git client, I guess, that you can also use with GitHub for Mac. Now, the way we use GitHub, we previously spoke about this. I wrote about it a few years ago. It hasn't changed. We are not using GitHub. Well, we use GitHub for code with our developers, but as
Right.
writers, we use GitHub and a bunch of private repos to share Markdown content and keep track of edits to those Markdown drafts of articles for Mac Stories and the club. And so I wanted an easy way to access those repos and manage those files and keep track of changes on the Mac. For years, I've been using working copy on iOS and iPadOS, but there's no working copy for macOS. And so for a while, I was using the official GitHub client, the official GitHub app for desktop, which is fine. It's made with Electron, so it's got a lot of like those standard Electron behaviors. But Nilean actually recommended this one to me. I had been using previously, and I think I mentioned it on AppStories, something called Tower for Mac.
Yeah, I'm still using that one
So,
myself.
which is another GitHub client that integrates with Kaleidoscope. So, Kaleidoscope, it's a diffing tool. The diff meaning that like it shows you differences between an older version of a file and a later version of the same file, which is useful for Markdown drafts if you want to check out, for example, the edits to a document. And Kaleidoscope integrates with a bunch of apps on macOS, whether those are like apps for writing code or apps for writing prose. And in this case, Kaleidoscope integrates with Tower, but I discovered, thanks to Nilean, that it also integrates with Fork. And I gotta say that I prefer the interface of Fork. I find it easier to understand. Tower is very much like developer oriented. I believe it's a great tool for developers. But me, I was looking for something a little more simplified, which I guess is the recurring theme with the apps that I picked today. Like something more intuitive, something simpler, something more like Mac native that somebody like me could understand quickly. And so what I like about Fork, it lets me clone a bunch of repos locally. So I can clone a repo from GitHub and save it into a folder in my documents folder in Finder. And I got a bunch of folders for different repos, and all those repos, they open as tabs in Fork. So it's very easy to switch between John drafts, for example, or the Club Mac Stories drafts. It's got a very simple UI when it comes to I know that there's a lot of GitHub terminology in here, so forgive me. When it comes to the push and pull of GitHub, which is not an expression, you're literally pulling the latest version of a file or you're pushing an update to a file. That UI is very reminiscent of working copy, and I find it easy to use. But mostly, I just love how in Fork, you can right click on a file and you have a bunch of options to deal with that document. You can right click and you can say, show me this file in Finder. So it's very easy to go from Fork to that file's location in the Finder app, or you
Mhm.
can choose to open that file with the diffing tool that's been selected in the app's preferences. In my case, I'm using Kaleidoscope. So it's a 2-click process to go from Fork and say, open this new version of this document alongside the previous version using Kaleidoscope. So I can check out, for example, my original document versus the edited document provided, with the edits that Devon, for example, applied to a story that I prepared. I find that entire flow very easy to understand, coming from working copy on the iPad, easier than other apps, and I just love how it looks. Like I immediately grasped the UI of Fork. So if you're looking for, oh, and I should also mention that I really like the history pop-up that you can get for a document to view like a list of all the changes to a specific document in reverse chronological order from
Mhm.
from the latest edits up to the oldest ones. So yeah, Fork for GitHub, I purchased it. Looks really cool, integrates with Kaleidoscope, and it's got a tab-based UI that works for me.
Oh, that's great. I've been actually using GitHub to create a vault in Obsidian for all the stuff we do at Mac Stories, and it's been really nice. I really like how it works because I have a vault with each folder is one of those repos, and if I start a new document, it's not in any of those repos. I just type it. I type up what I'm doing, then I drag it into the club, for instance, and then I sync everything up using one of these GitHub clients. So that's been a really nice addition to the way I'm working with some of the stuff we do. Federico, I want to do a little bit of a mini lightning round. We're going to pick a couple each of some Safari
Oh, I
extensions that we're
thought you wanted to
using.
talk about lightning cables. No.
No, no, no. This is a lightning round. Lightning
Okay.
cables, you know, you love a good cable, Federico. We have
Yes, but I hate
that has
lightning,
been
so there's that.
yeah, it's been established that you love a good cable based on Mac Stories Unwind this last week. But we're going to talk about Safari extensions instead, and I'm going to hit you with just two. The first
Okay.
one is Downy.
Ah, excellent one.
Yeah, Downy is a great app. I mean, it's a great Mac app. It's available, I guess, directly from the developer as well as part of SetApp. It allows you to download videos from a whole host of services. I use it primarily with YouTube because I often will download a video where I want to grab a freeze frame out of it or something like that for something I'm writing. There are a lot of reasons you might want to download something from YouTube. And Downy makes it super simple, and it's even simpler with the Safari extension because once you open up that YouTube page or whatever else it happens to be, you just click on the Downy button and it launches the app with that URL in the app and it starts doing its download. So it really couldn't be easier. I mean, it's not one that I use every single day, but it's really handy to have there. The second one that I want to mention today is Mark Download, which hasn't always been hasn't always worked as well as I would like it, but it has gotten some updates in recent months and it works a lot better now. And I really appreciate having this around because it lets you take any page on the web and download it as a markdown file. So, for instance, this is one of the ways that I have been experimenting with a read later setup based on markdown files stored in Obsidian because I can click on this Safari extension and automatically download an article to my downloads folder. Now that is not usually my preferred method of doing it because I really want to get it in Obsidian. And so what I do is it has settings that allow you to kind of craft a custom Obsidian file with its own particular YAML for things like author, website URL, whatever you can imagine in terms of metadata associated with a web page. And then I typically, though, will then use its right-click menu features on the Mac, because in addition to the Safari extension, you have, it's not in the services menu, it's standalone. You right-click on an article and you have a bunch of different options, like either copying as Markdown just a highlighted section of an article, a full article, sending it to Obsidian. There's several different options there. But if you like working with Markdown when it comes to saving text from the web for later, whether it's for reading or whether it's for research, whatever you're doing, Markdownload is a really good extension to use for that.
All right. I'm gonna pick Super Agent, which is it's a Safari extension that's actually available everywhere. You can create a Super Agent account, and you can also use the same extension on Windows with Chrome or
That's a good one,
Firefox
yeah.
or whatever. And its only purpose is to block those cookie consent notices that you see after because of GDPR in Europe and I guess everywhere else now. And it of all the GDPR / cookie blocking, like cookie consent blocking utilities I've tried over the years, it's the best one. Which is to say, it's not perfect, but it does a better job than others at either blocking or actually also like automatically accepting those prompts for you. And you can even decide in the extension settings like what auto accept flow do you want to implement. Like, do you want to always allow just essential cookies? Do you want to always block all cookies? Do you want to accept all the cookies that a website prompts you to accept? Like, it's really well done, and it syncs everywhere, and it also keeps track of how many clicks it saved you over the years. And I've been using it for years, and it saved me like 3,000 clicks or something.
Wow.
Which is, yeah, it's incredible. And the other extension I want to mention is Stop the Madness. This is a very good sort of like all-in-one extension to make the web a better place. It does a bunch of small things and bigger things. Like small things like for example, making sure that when you click on a Google search result, it opens the original search results URL with no tracking attached in a new tab, instead of like overriding your Google search and
Right.
then you cannot back out from that result. You know, the standard Google behavior that I absolutely hate. It does a bunch of like, it's a collection of small quality of life improvements for the modern web that altogether they make it an absolute must have for me. And whenever I don't have Stop the Madness installed, I remember why the web unfortunately can be a terrible place for some websites these days. And there's a bunch of settings like that you can tweak in the extension for things like web fonts, JavaScript, all sorts of like controls that you have. And all those settings, they also sync with iCloud on your other Apple devices. So I have the same Stop the Madness configuration across the Mac, iPhone, and iPad. I really like it. I believe there's either an in-app purchase or a subscription. I couldn't buy it fast enough. Once again, I have tried a bunch of these extensions over the years. This is the best one because it's like an all-in-one approach. It's constantly updated. The developer really cares about it, and I recommend it.
All right, that's a great one. All right, Federico, that's it for this week of App Stories. You can find the two of us over at macstories.net. Thanks to our three sponsors for this episode. That's Jam, Notion, and Tailscale. Don't forget to go check out Club Mac Stories and App Stories Plus. Go to club.plus to check out the club, and go to appstories.plus to check out App Stories Plus. We'd love to have you join. You can also find us on Mastodon. Just go to viticci.macstories.net and johnvorhees.macstories.net to follow the two of us there. And Federico and I are on Threads and Instagram. Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.